Welcome back to The Price of Business. I am your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. I tell you, we're going to take a little bit of a side course because, after all, it is my show. I'm really excited about having Alan Dershowitz on my show. I've been familiar with Mr. Dershowitz for many, many years. He's always been a relied-on source to talk about crucial issues, be it the law or even things that are happening on the international front. And I'm delighted to have him on the program. Welcome to the program, Mr. Dershowitz.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
You're an incredibly prolific author. You have worked in a lot of different arenas. You know, you're somewhat of a Renaissance man in an era where that's kind of hard to be because of your ability to touch a lot of different areas. But obviously, I think you're most well known for your relationship with the law. And in fact, you have a recent book that I certainly want to make sure we take a few moments to talk about, Your Life in the Law. Why don't you give us a little bit of information about that?
Well, it's interesting. I've just written two books. One called Taking the Stand, My Life in the Law, which is a kind of legal thriller autobiography. And then I've just written my first ebook called Terror Tunnels, the case for Israel's just war against Hamas. My first ebook, which I published literally while the war was going on, and you can do it in real time and get your audience really involved contemporaneously with events that are going on. So I love the idea of ebooks. And
yes.
I'm continuing to write. That's what I do now. I'm retired from Harvard Law School after 50 years of teaching there. And so life has changed for me.
Wow, that's incredible. What a great career. And I had no idea that you were able to, that you've been on Earth long enough to teach there for 50-plus years. I'm incredibly impressed. I started
when I was 25. I was the youngest professor in the law school's history.
Wow. Well, that's incredible. I want to talk to you a little bit. Obviously, you're talking to a Texas audience. If you're at all familiar with me or my work, I'm very conservative and really almost libertarian-minded. I found it interesting what you had to say about Ted Cruz, whom I think the media worked really hard at trying to get him treated as a gadfly. Senator Cruz has been on my program many times, and, to me, I sit there, and I am biased, I like Ted, but I sit there and I look at him, and I'm thinking, regardless of your ideology, you have to be impressed by his intelligence. And the more that the media has tried to dismiss him as a gadfly, the harder that's been. What's your thoughts about that?
Well, I've told all of my Democratic friends, do not dismiss Ted Cruz. He is, one of the smartest people in politics today. He was one of the best students I ever had at Harvard Law School. He is brilliant, and he's principled. And don't ever try to dismiss him as somebody who is just, political partisan, who's just posturing. He really believes what he stands for, and he's very, very smart. Now, he and I, though I consider him a friend, we don't agree on everything. We have different views on particularly social issues like, gay marriage, issues like the death penalty, issues like separation of church and state. We tend to agree on many libertarian issues and on some foreign policy issues. But whether you agree or disagree, you have to take Ted Cruz very, very seriously. Texas is being very well represented in the Senate by his intelligence, and I think there's a lot of appreciation for the views he expresses. And I think it's important in America not to get personal when you have disagreements with people. We can continue to disagree over the issues that I've discussed, and yet come together when it comes to protecting America's national interest, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that sums it up well. A lot of people talk about him having presidential ambitions. I, for one, actually think he couldn't be better designed to be a U.S. senator. He understands the nuances. He knows how to use it. In a Senate majority, my goodness, he could really be incredibly powerful in that position. I'm not sure if he's suited for presidential timber, but what was your thoughts about that?
Well, there are several different kinds of senators. When my friend, dear friend Ted Kennedy was first elected to the Senate, people thought he would be so liberal and so extreme that he wouldn't play an effective role in the Senate. Turned out that he was incredibly good at accommodating and at making deals and working closely with people like Orrin Hatch, who disagree with him on a great many issues. And he became the kind of senator that crossed over the aisle. But there's also a need for senators who retain a kind of ideological purity and who are less prepared to compromise. And, Ted clearly fits into the latter of those categories. He has very strong principles and ideals, and he's going to stand up for them even if he loses. He'd rather be right, I think, than be victorious sometimes in terms of compromise. So I think he'll be a very effective senator for many years to come. I'm a liberal Democrat, so I'm not going to support him if he runs for president. I'm going to support Hillary Clinton or whoever the Democrats put up. If they put up a decent candidate, I'm always open to voting Republican. I very much like Jeb Bush. I very much like Romney. And so, nobody can take my vote for granted ever. But my presumption is that I will vote with the way I voted for the last 50-something years of my life, Democrat.
Yeah. And so in a way, Ted Cruz is almost like the Bernie Sanders of the right. Because I consider Bernie Sanders to be fairly intelligent. We're actually very intelligent, articulate, and certainly ideologically sound, as far as his beliefs. He's not a compromiser.
No, and, there's a video of Bernie Sanders standing up to constituents of his who are screaming virulently anti-Israeli statements, and Bernie saying, look, those are not my views. You can't make me change my views on that. I do stand behind Israel's security. I can be critical of some of its policies. And he wouldn't budge. He wouldn't let the radical hard left anti-Israel, anti-American people, and by the way, the vast majority of anti-Israel people in this country are virulently anti-American too. Yes. He wouldn't let them budge him. Bernie is a man of principle. Ted is a man of principle. We need people like that in the Senate.
Alan Dershowitz, by the way, let's talk a little bit about that. You're like the segue expert. You did a great job for me. I didn't even have to do it. You've been very vocal about the U.S. and its treatment of Israel. I personally think it's shameful how the Obama administration has really been very soft in its view of Israel. And I find it very interesting how, in spite of the fact that the Democrats, the Jews as a race here in the United States have been incredibly loyal to Israel, but it seems like the Republicans have been far more interested in their objectives. What do you think about that?
I think that's right. And most recently, two senior officials of the Obama administration called Benjamin Netanyahu a chicken. I'm not going to add the last four words, but using a scatological term. This is a man, Benjamin Netanyahu, who personally fought terrorists, who was a volunteer in Israel's most endangered military group, whose brother died rescuing hostages in Entebbe, and for some bureaucrat sitting in the comfort of the White House to call Benjamin Netanyahu a chicken blank is so deeply offensive. And I can't figure out why the Obama administration, if they did, authorized these two senior officials to issue that statement. They also issued a statement saying that Netanyahu didn't have the courage to bomb the Iranian nuclear reactor. That is revealing classified assessments. I don't think it's true, but these two officials have no right to leak intelligence assessments, if those intelligence assessments have been made, about whether Netanyahu will or won't bomb Iran's nuclear reactor. The only people who benefit from that kind of disclosure are the Iranian mullahs, who now will go forward even more speedily to developing their own nuclear weapons.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's incredible. At some point, though, you begin to wonder, because it has done nothing. I believe that almost like the black population, the Democrats believe that they can do almost anything they want, and they'll continue to get the Jewish support. I don't know how. I don't know. What's your thoughts about that?
Well, I don't think that the Democrats can any longer count on support from any particular group. I think they're going to have to earn the support. And this election may be a very compelling one. Now, of course, elections, for the most part, are not decided on foreign policy issues. They're decided, for the most part, on domestic policy issues. And so they may feel that they can take kind of negative foreign policy stances without endangering their base. I think they're making a mistake if they think that.
Yeah, I think so, too. Finally, you have spoken out on the whole issue of Ebola. I'd love for you to chime in on that real quickly. This administration is chastising governors, and they're both Democratic and Republican governors, by the way, that I think are just essentially taking care of their constituents. You've been very vocal about this as well. Would you mention that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that governors have the responsibility to assure the public health of their citizens. And it does mean compromising some liberty of some people for a very brief period of time. But we have to be prepared for even worse viruses, airborne viruses, and we have to be ready to demand of people that certain compromises be made. And the idea of a 3-day mandatory quarantine is not so oppressive that we can't insist that it be done. You know, we have a rule in criminal law, better 10 guilty go free than 1 innocent be wrongly confined. That may be correct in the criminal law, but when it comes to contagious diseases, it's better to have 10 non-contagious people confined than even to have 1 contagious person be allowed to infect other people. So I think we have to err on the side of public safety when it comes to Ebola or any airborne illnesses.
Alan Dershowitz, we covered so much. Thank you so much. I went a little long, but frankly, it was well worth it. Do you have a website you'd like to point the listener to?
I'm a Luddite. I don't do high tech, but I'm sure there is a website in my name. It's probably just under my name. But, you know, you can get my book, Terror Tunnels, on Amazon Kindle or anything like that. It's about $5. Just press a button. And you can read what I have to say about that. So that's what I would encourage.
I encourage people to do just that. Look up Dershowitz, Dershowitz, Alan Dershowitz at Amazon. And I've read some of your work. Mainly I've read articles by you, but I've always been impressed. I think you're very fair, and I think I always believe you bring a lot to every conversation. So thanks for bringing a lot to our show today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You bet. When we come back, much more for you. Do want to remind you, best content here can be found over there at usgatoreview.com, and this is The Price of Persistence.